and welcome to Strange Britain. Today we are going to turn our eyes to the skies as we look at some strange sightings of unidentified flying objects, UFOs, in the skies of East Yorkshire. In the 1970s, Hull, of all places, was the centre of a cluster of UFO sightings. A strange circular craft, a classic flying saucer, was seen multiple times hovering in the skies overhead. In 1975, something strange happened in a quiet part of Hull called Garden Village, specifically on a street called the Oval. The people who lived there, or at least some of them, claimed that they saw a flying saucer actually land. This led to a lot of confusion amongst the locals. People remember being evacuated from their homes. Some were told that there'd been a gas explosion, some were told there was a gas leak, some remembered police, some remembered some people in black uniforms. Others swore blind it was because this UFO had landed on a small patch of grass in the area. So something clearly happened, but what that was we don't know. People at the time approached the Ministry of Defence for comment, but obviously no comment was ever forthcoming, and we're left with a little bit of a mystery. A couple of years later, on the 18th of January 1978 to be precise, in Anlaby, just to the west of Hull, this mysterious UFO, this flying saucer, was back, and this time it landed on, of all places, a school field. There was an 8-year-old boy present at the time, and he watched on in wonderment as this craft slowly touched down. He said it looked to be glowing softly and was the most beautiful sight he'd ever seen. Even to this day, the man's in his mid-50s, he can't think of anything he's seen more beautiful than that craft. As he watched, much to his surprise, a door on the side slid open with a soft hiss. 3 figures left the craft and began inspecting a section on the far side of it. They were clad in golden clothing, and it says like they themselves were glowing from within. They appeared to be short, about 5 foot tall, and had large pear-shaped heads. The glow made it impossible for him to see any facial features in detail, but the lad did remark that what they were wearing certainly wasn't suitable for a cold, gloomy January day in Hull. After about 5 minutes, the boy ran off to find his friend and hopefully a grown-up. He wanted to share this amazing sight with them too, and if a grown-up came along, that meant that they'd have to believe him, because even at that age he knew no one would believe him. The lad, however, was in luck. He found the school's caretaker, who followed the boy back to the landing site. When they returned, the figures were nowhere to be seen, so presumably they'd re-entered the craft, which, thankfully, thought the boy, was still there. As they watched the boy and the caretaker, a soft low hum was now emanating from the craft. After a few seconds, the hum began to increase in pitch, and as it did, the craft gently raised up off the ground before slowly gaining altitude. Once it reached a height of around several hundred feet, the craft began to accelerate, and just like that, in the blink of an eye, it was gone. The caretaker ran quickly to where the craft had landed and noticed 3 compression areas of earth, each about 3 feet in diameter, which he concluded must have been the craft's landing gear. A report was made, but no explanation of what the craft was or where it came from has ever been offered. Curiously, there was a similar encounter that happened decades earlier in Bolton. A young boy was playing hide and seek with his friends when he encountered 3 figures he would not soon forget. They were huddled in a back alley, just on the outskirts of Bolton, and when they realised that the young lad was watching them, they faded away, his words, in a blinding flash of light. The boy's description of the 3 figures is instantly familiar to us. He said they're around 5 foot tall, they had fish bowls on their heads. He said he got a good look at them and they had pale grey skin over these pear-shaped heads. Sound familiar? Along with overly large black eyes. It sounded like the classic, now stereotypical little grey aliens, complete with the helmets, although they're wearing golden suits. But the thing was, this concept of a spaceman, of a UFO, was totally unknown to the boy. Why? Well, because this sighting happened all the way in 1926. Back then, flight itself was a relatively new concept, and the idea of space travel was nothing more than wishful thinking. Even the bright light which coincided with the figures disappearing is familiar to us now. It's the classic beam me up from Star Trek. Hull itself has long been considered a hotspot for UFO activity, with people spotting strange objects in the skies above. But did you know the first documented UFO encounter in Hull predates the term UFO by almost a century and a half? The date was June the 19th, 1801. The night was clear over the bustling docks and the quiet streets of Hull. Just imagine the scene. It's 1801. The townsfolk are stepping out for a breath of fresh air. The night watchman's making his rounds. Suddenly, their gaze was diverted upwards, not to the familiar sight of the moon, but to something far more peculiar. Reports at the time described the initial appearances like an immense moon, but with a black bar across the middle. Picture that in your mind, a colossal lunar disk, this circular object that looked to be the size of the moon, but they knew it wasn't the moon because it was about 2/3 full and on the other side of the sky. So this was seen at the same time as the moon, and there was this dark line running across its equator, could we say? And it was hanging silently over the river Humber. It was definitely no moon. It was clearly something else entirely. The strange celestial body, or whatever it was, then began a series of bizarre transformations. The large singular object reportedly split into 7 distinct smaller objects described at the time as globes of fire. As the witnesses watched, these smaller lights vanished and reappeared, then vanished, and were dancing around in the sky. As these transformations continued, the lights reformed once again into the form of this weird second moon. Then finally, they broke into 5 lights, which were apparently described as being not unlike stars, which all shot off in different directions. Whilst this encounter took place, the whole of Hull was glowing with a faint blue light from above, and no one could explain it. It was otherworldly over the familiar landscape of Hull. What makes this 1801 sighting particularly compelling is the amount of documentation we have of it that's contemporary of the time. Historian Mike Covell's researchers unearthed multiple newspaper accounts of this, and they went from all across England and Scotland. The events of Hull weren't just a little local story, they were national news. Consider the context though, this is a time before powered flight, decades before even the earliest airships. The idea of a manufactured object performing such aerial manoeuvres, emitting a light that could make a whole city glow blue, and changing shape in this way would have been utterly alien to the people of 1801, so perhaps alien's the right word. Covell himself pointed out that the unique description of the object, so different from the more common cigar-shaped UFOs that started in the mid-19th century towards the classic flying saucers and triangles by the 20th century. For this one, a glowing moon with a black line across the middle. Mike Covell reckoned it looked like the Death Star from Star Wars due to its immense size in the description. So just imagine that, the Death Star above Hull in 1801. There was another bit of UFO lore in 2009. There was a whole spate of sightings all around Bridlington to Hull, and it became known as the Willsforp incident. These incidents occurred roughly between May and September of 2009 on that 25-mile stretch of coastline. It's usually best known for its tranquil beauty, but it became a hotspot of this unexplained aerial activity. Witnesses, from holidaymakers to residents and pretty much everything else you can imagine in between, began reporting strange lights and unconventional craft in the skies above, and even, according to quite a few accounts, entering the sea and emerging again. One witness said it was just hovering there, silent, bright white lights, but not like any plane I'd ever seen. And the shape, it was odd, sort of oblong, but with rounded edges. Reports varied, but there was lots of commonality between them. They're often described as being white, maybe sometimes a yellow coloured, and they moved in a way that common and conventional aircraft just couldn't. Some witnesses said that they were silent, others said that there might have been a low hum. One of the most compelling accounts of this whole wave of sightings involved an elderly couple enjoying the coastal scenery from their holiday rental. Their account, if accurate, paints a picture of an almost unbelievable aerial armada above the skies that night. The first witness said that there must have been 30 or 40 of them, and that they looked to be all different sizes. Some were just lights, others looked like shapes, and they're flying all over the place like a dance. But the Willsforp incident took an even more intriguing turn, with reports from a less conventional group of witnesses, local bait diggers working along the shoreline. These are people who would dig out bait for the fishing industry, and they claim to have observed triangle-shaped craft. Triangles that were entering the sea. So we're not on about the Bermuda Triangle, we're on about the Humber Triangle, if you will. Imagine witnessing one of these triangular crafts silently submerging itself beneath the waves of the North Sea, only to emerge back up again. These bait diggers, though, their story didn't just end there. They further alleged that shortly after these underwater incursions, they were, quote, surrounded by soldiers. This detail immediately raises questions and adds a bit of a layer of official interest or secrecy to these events. Why would military personnel allegedly be present at a location where UFO activity was, and where they were seen entering the sea? Was it coincident? Were they making it up? or were they there to investigate what was going on? It's these questions that remain and continue to fuel speculation in the Willsforp incident. Official explanations for the sightings were, as is always the case pretty much, less than forthcoming. While some have suggested misidentification of regular aircraft natural phenomenon, the sheer volume and consistency of these reports, particularly the specific detail, make it quite difficult to dismiss these events, don't they? In May 2023, residents of Hull reported witnessing another unusual aerial object. Unlike the more common descriptions of lights or indistinct shapes, this was somewhat more detailed and somewhat fantastical, for want of a better word. One of the witnesses says, and I quote, "It was just there, moving slowly, this huge gold light, absolutely glittering in the sun, and it had these tiny little wings, almost like a fairy or something like that, but it was massive. I've never seen anything like it." According to the report, this unusual object was seen moving across the Hull skyline before suddenly shooting off eastwards at great speed. This abrupt departure is also something characteristic of UFO, movements that can defy the capabilities of even our best aircraft. Could this large glittering ball of light have been an experimental aircraft, perhaps a drone with a very unusual design? Perhaps it was just a normal aerial phenomenon, just reacted to sunlight in a slightly weird way. One thing we can say for certain is that over the last 2 centuries there have been literally thousands of reports of strange objects in the skies surrounding Hull and the Humber. So if you ever find yourself in that part of the country, keep your eyes to the skies, as you never know what you might see.